Well, we are now ready to begin lesson 3 of A Christmas Ornament to Remember. Hopefully everybody's made a lot of progress with the 2 pieces of stitching that needed to be done for the front, for the base, and then the wired leaf elements that we'll deal with in lesson 4. So as we begin on lesson 3, you're going to take your piece of silk and the other piece of the cotton fabric and pin them together with the cotton fabric facing up. Next, you'll take template number 7, and the only thing you're going to transfer on this template is the green dotted line in the center of your template. Either template can be used. So I generally use a colored pencil to transfer my design, very sharply pointed pencil, and lightly trace the line. You'll see I have a green dotted line. That will not show when you do your feather stitching on the front silk side of the fabric. We're going to take now your sewing thread, your ivory sewing thread, and baste the line, the dotted line, so that the circle will be transferred onto the front of the silk. You're going to do that so that there's a larger stitch on the underneath and just a small stitch in the cotton on the back. This does not need to be knotted. But if you need to knot it so that it works for you, that's fine. Just make sure you don't have a lot of tail, because it should not show through on the front of your silk. Once you have your design transferred, you'll end up with a piece like this. You can turn the light off, and the next thing you're going to do is to put your template number 8 underneath, so that you can see where you want your flowers to line up, because they are 2 different designs. The mistletoe flowers line up with 5 blossoms across the bottom, and the holly, there are 6 blossoms. They're at 12 and 6 and 2, 12, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 on a clock. That way they're relatively evenly spaced around. So depending on which design you're using, if you're using the holly, you'll want the red the red poinsettias. If you're using the mistletoe, you'll want the white blossoms. They'll coordinate better with the fronts of your ornament. So now that we have our template, the stitching line secured with the basted stitch, you're going to put your silk in with the cotton into your hoop, and we'll be ready to begin following the instructions that start on page 24 of your handout. The base of your wreath is stitched in a single feather stitch line. If you want to do larger than that, that's fine, but you'll have to adapt your line so that you don't make the wreath any wider than it is, or it won't fit on the inside the ornament size. I'm going to begin the feather stitch up at this side about at 11 o'clock. And I'm going to start it with an away waist knot. My first stitch or two are going to be very tiny little stab stitches that will anchor the thread so that I don't have any knot and it won't show with the feather stitch. I'm going to use the line that we transferred in the white thread as the center point for my feather stitch. So my first stitch is going to come just outside of the line. I'm going to start my feather stitch just outside of the line. It's maybe 1/8 of an inch outside. My next stitch will be right on the stitching thread, the basting thread. And I'm going to come up just to the left of that thread, which will make my first stitch. The next stitch is even with this stitch that's the stitch that holds down the feather, and just to the right. Again, about 1/8 of an inch or less. I'm going to continue this way all the way around. If you need 3 lines to be able to stitch your feather stitch evenly, you will have to baste 2 more lines, just like the one we stitched before. One to the outside, just 1/8 of an inch away, and one's to the inside. And then you'll have to make sure that you pull those other stitches out. This center line will not show when your feather stitch is done. The other ones might show. But if you consistently go the same distance outside with the point, with your needle going in, even with where it came out from catching the previous stitch, you really won't need that the extra rows of stitching. The basting thread will stay in. By the time we get around to this end, we'll meet up with the other stitches so that you won't be able to see where you started and stopped. Make sure that when you start your feather stitch that you start with the right color thread for your ornament. I think that the feather stitches on both, I believe, wait a minute. The feather stitch for the mistletoe starts with using the color A, and for the holly, you're going to use the same. No, I'm sorry. Your feather stitch for both ornaments, the base feather stitch, will be stitched in letter A. It's the same color for both. That would be your, I believe it's the DMC 470. The extra evergreens that you can add in are optional colors, and the instructions are written for which colors you can use. And which stitches. For the purposes of this, we're going to use the 470 to do the base wreath. Try and keep the same distance uniformly throughout the stitching of the feather stitch for how far apart your legs on the feather stitch are going. If you don't pull down too tightly on your feather stitch, the catch stitch that catches the loop, you'll have a nice rounded stitch. If you pull it too tightly, they're going to look like V's. And they just look a little bit better when they're not quite so angular where it attaches to the center of the wreath. And that one's just a little too close. When you come to a point where you need to change threads or start a new thread, the easiest way to have this knot show, again, is do your feather, pull the stitch down, and go right up against where the stitch will be on the thread so that it does not leave a tail underneath or an extended stitch. Then at this point, you can go to the back and take several stitches in one direction and then come back in the other direction through the other straight stitches, and that will not come back out. Then you can snip the thread close to the fabric, and you're ready to start a new strand of thread. To start the new thread, I'm going to do the exact opposite of what we just did to tie off, and I'm going to go in the same direction that I finished with and come up a couple of stitches on the side that we went down through, and then go back to the front and take my 2 little tiny stab stitches where I know that they're going to get covered with thread. Then I'm going to come back up the same place where that stitch caught up there. We're going to come down or come up through the fabric, go back down right there at the 1/8 distance away on the opposite side, and catch the stitch. And then we'll continue back around. For the purpose of demonstrating this, let's pretend that I finished stitching all the way around to here. I'm going to come back, pretend that I've stitched all the way around to here. My feather stitches are going to be coming this way. Okay, you can see that we're getting close to being able to reattach or to attach back to the beginning of the wreath. So you're going to want to look and see which way your wreath has to go. Mine needs a stitch over on this side. That will come right here. And right next to it will be the last stitch for the wreath that will catch the stitch that we take to pull down the loop, will catch just above that very first stitch where we came out of the fabric to start the wreath. And that's where the thread will go back down. And we'll tie it off the same way in the back that I showed you before, so that your wreath actually will continue all the way around and meet back at the beginning just the way it should. Okay, the stitches are the same for the poinsettia for both the mistletoe ornament and the holly ornament. The only difference is the color of your thread. If you use the 498 thread, red, it's more of a cranberry, for your holly berries on the front, you're going to want to use those for your poinsettias on the back. Or if you use 347, you're going to use the 347 again. The mistletoe are all the off-white, and I think they are the letter E which I believe is the ecru, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, they're stitched in the ecru. So to start the poinsettia blossoms, I'm going to start at the bottom because all of them are going to have to start at the bottom. The center bottom is the design that you're going, or the blossom that you're going to start first. And that's for either the white or the red. This is easy enough to just do a couple of little stab stitches that won't show because the center of your poinsettia is going to have colonial knots in it to fill the center, and it'll cover where we tie on with these little back stitches or stab stitches. So your poinsettia is going to have 6 blossoms. They're all lazy daisy stitches. They're all going to come out from just the center of the blossom. Don't make them very large because this design just fits in the shape of the ornament. We don't want to go outside so that it's over the edge of the ornament. Leave your lazy daisy so that there's a loop and not pulled straight. We want to see a little bit of the fabric in there, and then the little point on the end from the catch stitch that holds the lazy daisy in place. Make 6 of those stitches for each flower. You can look at your template number 8 for the placement of your blossoms. And if you need to mark them with a piece of your thread that can be taken out or covered over. You don't really want it to stay there. A poinsettia does have a pointed end to the leaf. So that's why we're making the little lazy daisy end just a little bit longer than you would a typical lazy daisy stitch. Maybe 1 or 2 fabric threads away from the end of the loop so that it looks like the pointed blossom, pointed petal. It helps to hold the loop down as you're taking that last stitch so that you don't pull it too tightly. Because if you pull it too tightly, it'll be a flat stitch, or just a straight stitch. Since you have the white fabric underneath, that will provide, and the green threads, that will provide enough coverage that if you travel with your red thread under, some of those feather stitches, you should be able to travel up to the next blossom and not have the thread show on the front. Okay, you're going to come back down. This will be our 4 o'clock poinsettia. Again, same exact stitch. The back of this ornament goes much more quickly than the front did. but it adds a nice finish to the ornament. Okay. The other poinsettias will go in the other places according to the diagram on template 8. Those of you that are doing the mistletoe, you're going to have the same one down at number 6, and then your template shows 2 more on either side of that one at number 6. So you'll have 5 poinsettias that are all stitched in the white or the ecru thread. Once you've finished your poinsettia blossoms, we're going to add some other green leaves, evergreen branches and leaves into the design. And then we'll go on to do our gold thread, the metallic thread. Now that we have our poinsettias stitched, we're going to, I want to show you how to do the fishbone stitch and the fly stitch leaf that you can use to fill in some of the areas on your wreath. Let's do the fly stitch first. We're going to take one stitch. You're going to do your tiny little back stitch to, or stab stitches to get your thread anchored. You're going to cover that up with the first stitch for your fly stitch. And come up in the center so that you have a longer leaf at the point. The next stitch, come on either side of that stitch, and then back at the base of that first stitch. Don't pull your stitch too tightly, or you'll have V's again instead of the gentle curve. You want a gentler curve because you want the next set of stitches to fill in around those 2 that you already have. And you want them kind of like cupped. They almost have an evergreen, almost like a pine needle effect. As you bring the leaf down, the branches down, you can angle them so that they go into the wreath base. And when you have them in far enough to your base, just end that stitch off. You can go back to the back and tie off that stitch and travel through your feather stitches again to the next space where you want to put another green leaf. That's the fly stitch. The fishbone stitch is angled. Again, you have the one stitch in the center. That's a longer stitch. And then you angle your stitches off of the side, one side, and then come down and make that stitch. The next one is going to come down from this side and you alternate from one side to the next, always going back into the center vein. You can add these green stitches or any other green stitches that any other stitches that you'd like to add to your Christmas greenery, winter greenery, evergreens. Just enough to fill in just a little bit around your feather stitching. You don't want to overpower the feather stitching. You want it to look like it's still there. This one, just tuck it under it looks like it's coming out from behind the poinsettia leaf. Now, after you've filled in where you want the extra greenery, we're going to change needles, we're going to change thread, and this will be for either the mistletoe or the holly. Okay, now you're going to use your crewel needle and the diamante thread And I have taken that thread and pulled one strand out. It's a triple strand of thread. I'm going to separate it out and pull out just one strand. And it's tricky. You have to be gentle with it. You don't want to pull it too hard, because this is a metallic that's wrapped around a nylon core. You do not want to be pulling just the nylon thread to stitch with. It's not going to give you the pretty effect that the metal does. As tedious as this may be, it's easier than doing the 3 strands when you're working with for your knots. Using your number 9 crewel needle and the eye thread, you're going to do your colonial knots for the centers of your poinsettia for the red poinsettias. The best way to do this is to knot the end, which is not what we usually do. But since you're going to be doing colonial knots on the front, you need to be able to have this anchored in. So go ahead and knot the end of your thread. This thread again can travel along the back of your design. I'm going to start up here at the top poinsettia. I'm going to make 1 colonial knot. Under, and scoop it around. Hold it tight. Pull your knot down to the fabric, and then pull your needle through. I'll do that again. Come up in the center. Hold your thread taut. Scoop, wrap, pull, put your needle down to the fabric, pull your knot down to the fabric. Pull the knot through. You could use a French knot. I don't think it's going to show up as well as a colonial knot will for these centers. Scoop, wrap, and pull. Scoop, wrap, insert needle, pull. Keep that thread taut until you're all the way in. Again, scoop, wrap, insert, pull it down, hold it tight, pull it down. Now, at this point, when you have all of your centers in your poinsettias, you have 2 options with your poinsettia, with your holly ornament. You do have a baggie with tiny little petite needles, petite glass beads in it that are gold. Scoop, wrap, insert, pull. And you have the option of either leaving your center blank, or you could fill it in with the little glass beads using one ply of your diamante thread, and we'll do that in a minute. Or you can add more of your colonial knots to the center. Any of those are options. They just get scattered throughout the center. And they add a little bit of sparkle to your ornament. The holly ornament on the back does not get a bow unless you really want to put a bow. That's up to you. I do have a bow on the mistletoe. And that one is finished a little bit differently than this. So this would be your colonial knots. Just sprinkle them around. You can go inside and outside of the wreath. Just don't go too far close to the edge, because you will need to be able to turn this into the teardrop shape when we're ready to start to do the construction at our next meeting. Okay, so that would be how we handle the colonial knots on the back. If you're doing if you want to do the glass beads instead, you're going to use your beading needle and one ply of the diamante thread. Finding my beading needle. Okay, once again, you are going to have to knot your gold thread. The easiest way to sew your beads on once I have a knot in my thread. Okay. Okay. You're going to bring your needle up from the back and lose it on the floor. Hold on a second while I find my needle. Thank heavens for long-handled magnets. Again, thread that single strand. And some of your little gold beads. one bead at a time. And I have attached these using 4 little stitches to hold them in place, almost giving it a starburst effect. If you just do the one stitch, your bead is going to pop up and stand on its end. If you come back down and you go back into the center of the bead a second time, and come through, your bead will actually stand with the hole facing up. And then you'll have the 2 stitches, top and bottom, come back up again. And you could either come back up through the center of the bead or come up where you want the other leg to show and go down into the center. That's probably easier. And then go to the other side directly across from it and make that other stitch. You can't get 4 stitches with the 3 strands of the diamant, the 3 plies. It will not go through the bead. It's too small. But if you do this, you end up with a little star-shaped effect in there. You can see it on these with the mistletoe that I've done. You can see all 4 little legs that hold it on. So those are your options for filling this. You can do some on the outside, inside of that teardrop shape. Now that we've finished the embroidery on the back, I've demonstrated the beads and the colonial knots. You can see the centers of the mistletoe are the colonial knots, and then the beads are throughout the other part. On this finished one, I did take some of the beads to the outside section. The last thing we have to do before we do the construction is to make our little bow for the mistletoe wreath, or if you really want to put it on your holly leaf, you could. I think it would be better if it were up at the top on the back of the holly ornament. I think the bow up at this point coming down would be a very nice touch for that one, because you don't really want to cover up any of your poinsettia blossoms. So you'll have a 6-inch piece of ribbon, and it is a wired metal ribbon. Use your metal cutting scissors. And the bow, I've taken it to a point where I find the center of it and take one side to the middle and then the other side, twist it up to the middle to make the 2 loops. So you've folded your ribbon so that you have the 2 loops. You're again going to use that same color thread as your silk, the cotton or the regular sewing thread. And you don't have to sew the bow together before you attach it to the fabric. Just go in and get several stitches in there nice and tight so that you catch all 3 layers of the ribbon for the bow. You have this one, and this one that comes underneath. And you want to come up from underneath, under the fabric, come up, whoop, You're going to have knotted your thread before you go try and do this. But you want to make sure that you have at least 3 stitches that connect all 3 pieces of thread, of ribbon. And it doesn't show as much as you think it might, because the ribbon has a white and a gold fleck to it. So you're going to sew it together like that, and then attach it to your fabric and just do 1 or 2 more stitches, take it to the back, tie it in a knot, and we are finished lesson 3.